Hi everyone, I'm America Josh and welcome to Tips for Australians planning their move to the US in 2021. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know lots of you have been considering a move to the US but have been forced to delay or cancel that move given the current environment. Between coronavirus and recent executive policies restricting immigration, lots of you are pushing back timelines and some of you are at the very early stages and some of you are very close to moving. It's obviously difficult for everyone, but we thought that we could get together and make sure that you're ready to go as soon as the travel restrictions and all of these hurdles are lifted out of the way. I've been in New York for almost 4 years from Adelaide, and I remember the excitement that you're all going through at the moment. So hold on to it, don't lose it. It's just a little bit longer. When I first moved, I did a lot of prepping, a lot of watching things like this, and realized when I got here that my biggest hurdle in New York City was ordering a sandwich at a bodega. It turns out some of the most ridiculous things are the bits that trip you up. So, first tip for the night is that a hero is a big roll. You're all welcome. That's the hot tip. That's what you've come here for. But that launched America Josh, and the idea that all of these big and small topics can, if you've got some answers to those things, if you've got some tips and tricks, it can really help you out. So that's what brought us here tonight. So we thought we'd make that transition even easier, and we thought we'd take all the questions that you submitted, some things that we know, and we'd compile that into a bit of a chat. And that leads me to introduce our wonderful guest, Akinyi from Nova Credit. Thanks so much for coming on tonight and sharing your insights. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about you and what Nova Credit is and maybe any hurdles that you had when you were moving?
Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Akinyi, and I lead marketing at a fintech company called Nova Credit. Fintech's basically just a fancy name for financial technology. And despite the accent, don't let that fool you, I am also British. So one of the things that confused me about the States is the kind of alphabet soup of health insurance policies and all the fun stuff that you'll get to experience when you move to the US. And so now I'll just tell you a little bit about Nova Credit, and then we can get into answering the nitty gritty of what it's like to move to the US and particularly what you should think about in 2021. So Nova Credit is a cross-border credit bureau that partners with a wide array of financial institutions, which basically means that we can translate your credit history from Australia and have it move with you when you come to the States and help you get a head start on life in the US. And that will allow you to apply for products and services here in the States. And given our company's mission, we're very focused on newcomer-related topics, and we want to help Australians have what they need to arrive and thrive in the US. And we've been working with America Josh for some months now to get that information across and help you as you make that move.
You have, and we've had good fun doing things like this. So thanks again for joining us tonight, and I know you've got lots of tips and insights. I've spoken to a lot of Australians, like all the people that are on here tonight, and who might have had plans to move in 2020. What trends are you seeing at Nova sort of generally in regards to immigration?
Given the fact that there are border closures, immigration is in flux right now. A lot of things are confusing and hard to decipher. So obviously thinking about delaying your move right now is understandable. With all of the uncertainty in the world right now, it's really hard to make a decision like moving up to a new country. But we also understand that a lot of people have a good reason to move. It might be, they want to be reunited with a loved one, they want to take on a new job, or try something new. So while it's still hard to move it amidst the global pandemic, we're still seeing some continued interest in Australians who are moving to the US every day. And so for those individuals, we recommend that you take the time this year to really plan all the details ahead of moving next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think the people that have tuned in tonight, it's a great start. That's a fantastic way to sort of kick off that getting ready and spending as much of the time that you've got right now to make sure you've connected with as many groups as possible, attended as many of these events as you possibly can. Obviously, there are lots and lots of things that you have to consider when you're doing a big move like Australia to the US, between housing and job planning and endless logistics and things. What would you say where do you start?
Well, first and foremost, I would recommend that you start with your visa and your registration paperwork. The US visa process can be a bit intimidating. It can take some time to make sense of. And so it's important that you first take the time to research different visa types. You want to triple check your visa eligibility, make sure you all have the right forms in place. And as you may have heard, the US recently announced an executive policy that limits certain visa types that can be issued until the end of the year. Now, there's a silver lining in what is otherwise a kind of confusing, disappointing policy. The E3 visa, which is one of the most common types of visas for Australians moving to the US, is not included in that list. And 20% of Australians' visas in the US are E3 visas. So you can still come to work in the US if you have a bachelor's degree and a job offer that uses this degree. But other popular types of visas among Aussie expats in the US include, the F1 visa for students, and that's also unaffected at this time.
No, which is fantastic. And I think you're exactly right that getting as much information as you can about visas is going to work to your advantage. Just reading absolutely everything. I know there's a lot of information out there, and obviously at America Josh and at Nova Credit, there's lots of we've compiled all that into something that's a bit more interactive, a bit easier to understand, a bit easier to digest, because you don't want to interpret the wrong information, you don't want to take that on. So making sure you sort of trust a particular group and make sure that you're looking at everything that they're talking about, it's going to help you in the long run. I know we had a bunch of questions submitted about J1s and H1Bs and when they'll be lifted, and also around consulates and embassies and when they'll be opened. Unfortunately, we don't know. We don't want to speculate because it sort of might cause some confusion. There are no sort of firm dates. The J1s and H1Bs, it's currently until the end of the year, but there is a clause that says it will be reviewed at that point. So we don't want to exactly say what might be happening and what might not be happening. And I apologize that we can't answer those questions, but as soon as we know anything, we'll be on something like this and we'll be having another chat with everyone. But before people do move over on an E3 or an F1, people come over on ESTAs, for example, or they come over on tourist visas. Do you have any extra advice for the people that are considering doing that at the moment?
Yes, I do. So it's really important that you track Australian policy very closely as well, particularly amidst COVID-19. So currently, Australian and permanent residents cannot leave the country, but they can apply online for an exemption if you meet certain criteria. And the exemption application should take at least 2 weeks before your planned journey. So you really want to take a close look at Australian policy.
No, good call. And I know for people who have not lived abroad for like the last 12 months, basically, you're going to have to find a reason to get that exemption to move. So make sure you look at the Department of Home Affairs. That's the department in Australia that's really controlling a lot of this. And make sure you read their site. They've got a great list of resources for Corona. So putting that out of the way, and we've fast forwarded to 2021, let's pretend that you're now eligible for a work visa. You've read through all of these documents. Let's say an E3, what's next?
Yeah. So beyond your visa type, one of the things that you want to research when you're moving to the US is social security numbers, which you also might see online as SSNs, and whether or not applying for one is the right choice for you. And so social security numbers are similar to tax file numbers in Australia. They're typically used if you intend to work in the US, if you intend to get social security benefits, or if you want to apply for certain financial services. They're typically issued to US citizens, and as well as those who are authorized to work in the States. And it's free to apply for social security numbers. So while most people are recommended to apply for one, some individuals are ineligible, in which case you should apply for something called an ITIN, which stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. It's an alphabet soup, so even I...
Another alphabet soup, yeah.
So ITINs are issued to residents with foreign status, and those two forms of IDs are used for a number of important services, from applying to credit to opening a bank account. So be sure to look into what makes the most sense for you. And then in addition to that, if you're in the process of applying for your visa, you should look into scheduling your appointment for your social security number ahead of time while filling out your immigrant visa application. If you're a non-immigrant, you're going to have to go in person because you can't do it online while applying for the visa process. And the U.S. has some funny terminology. So in the U.S., immigrant visas are issued to foreigners who intend to live permanently in the U.S. So let's say you might be coming to join your spouse. But non-immigrant visas are for foreigners who want to enter the U.S. on a temporary basis. So if you're coming for tourism, if you're coming temporarily to work for a few years, or similar reasons. So if you're on a non-immigrant visa, that second category, you unfortunately have to do it in person. But if you find that you are eligible to visit an office, you should keep in mind that offices are limiting in-person service in the States because of COVID. So make sure to look up the latest office closure policy when you officially arrive in the U.S. And you can typically find that on the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, UCIS, if I want to add more acronyms to it.
No, and it's important. That language is really important when you're talking about a move, especially now that US immigration does potentially look at social media and things. And it's important to know that The E3 visa, as one of the visas that we're talking about tonight, is a non-immigrant visa. You are not planning to move permanently. If your planning is to come over and stay for a long time, that's fine, but the E3 visa is a limited term of 2 years, and it is renewable, but it's each 2 years you have to basically say, I'd like 2 more years, please. And it's important to make those differences just in your head, and when you arrive at the gate, just being aware of those things, because it does help just make things flow more smoothly. And as you were saying, we're collecting like acronyms and we're collecting paperwork. It sounds like that's going to be pretty critical going down these tracks.
It's important to make copies of all that important paperwork. Keep track of all the documents that you filed. Keep copies of them. Print them out, and make sure that you have them in different bags when you move. You don't want to misplace a bag and then find out, oh God, that important I number document is gone. So have access to digital copies as well. It's helped a lot of my friends who moved to the States, and myself included.
No, for sure. I remember walking through, I had like 2 folders and I was so ready to answer any question. And for me, being ready, I obviously had an air of being confident enough and I was ready to answer anything. But I didn't get asked one question. So I have a USB with a backup of it, have some photocopies, put it in your second bag in case your bag gets lost. Just make sure you've taken care of all those things, because it'll make your life impossibly easier if you've got them. So legal issues, social security, paperwork stacked on top of each other. What's next?
So for many newcomers, housing is going to be top of mind. Where do you go when you leave the airport? But it's hard to know where to begin your research. So each city has really different norms for finding housing. In New York, where Josh and I live, for example, it's really common for residents to rely on brokers to scout apartments and pay brokers' fees. And those fees can be pretty high. So you just want to be aware of the norms in whatever city you're relocating to. And one way to find apartments that perhaps have no fee, or find apartments that might be suitable for you, or even find a roommate if you happen to be looking for one, is to explore Facebook posts to get a sense of what the norm is in your city, and do as much research as you can on neighborhoods that you're interested in. And while you're preparing for your move, make sure you have a really clear sense of your budget and what you're looking for, particularly if you're going to have to take public transportation, for example, or if you're going to have to drive. So other key questions you might want to consider, is the neighborhood safe? What's the commute like? Are there grocery stores around, etc.?
No. What about in terms of neighborhoods? Like, do you have any tricks for exploring like neighborhoods? Because I know I get the question a lot around that kind of thing.
I think that when you're first moving to the States, it's really preferable to start with short-term leasing options and book them as far in advance so you have one less thing to worry about. Or if you happen to have someone who's a friend that you can stay with, that makes it easier. I mean, when I was moving to the States from London last September, I was lucky enough to be able to stay with a friend for a few weeks. And that helped me get my head around, where did I want to live? And I ended up realizing that, hey, I prefer Brooklyn to Manhattan, for example. But that being said, with short-term options, it's often really hard to commit to a long-term lease without credit when you're still abroad. And if you don't have first-hand experience with all these different neighborhoods and you're trying to make sense of names and locations, it can be really difficult. So while you're still abroad, I recommend looking into those short-term housing options called sublets or other rental services that will allow you to stick to those short-term commitments while you're figuring it all out. And that way you can take the time to see the different neighborhoods like I was explaining I did, look at apartments in person, and really feel more confident in whatever you're committing to.
No, I think it's you've got to get used to the idea that short-term is the best when you first move. And that was one that I didn't really think about. I'd been in my house in Australia for years, and therefore this idea of moving and not being in that place was sort of a bit strange. But there are websites like Zillow and StreetEasy, and even Airbnb has some really good reviews of neighborhoods. They give you just a bit of a sense, because you can read all the things in the world. These will all help you to get that first neighborhood, but you want to be able to have the ability, as you said, you might get to a borough in New York and realize that that's not the borough for you. Are there any other tips, I guess, people are looking to secure that housing? Have you got any other tips about how to lock that down?
Yes. So you really want to have your paperwork in order, because especially in the biggest U.S. cities, housing stock can go really quickly. And so the sooner you have your paperwork at hand, the faster you'll get into that dream apartment you found. So things that will be really important are, proof of identification, your bank statements, proof of employment, and other information from your previous apartments. So, for example, a letter from your former landlord endorsing you as a tenant would also be really helpful.
Okay, so visa, social security, short-term housing. What's next?
Well, another thing that a lot of newcomers often wonder about is mobile plans. And so most carriers offer prepaid plans that don't require credit score and allow you to pay for services up front. But if you're going to go with a prepaid plan, it can be easier to start with that upon arrival in the States. That being said, there's also postpaid plans, and those typically have better deals and also often include phones. So you can finance your phone over the course of several months. If you're going to opt for a postpaid plan, you're going to need a credit score. And so if you do have family and friends in the States, you can ask to join their family phone plan, but most carriers will make you go with that prepaid option.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Phone. I mean, you're going to need a phone because every single little thing that you do will need to be Googled, and you need to go to Nova Credit and America Josh when you're looking for little tips and tricks that when you're over here. Do you have any, what about apps? Are there particular apps that you recommend people get before they come?
So Google Maps and City Mapper for navigating your way around your new city. If you're looking for food delivery, the common ones in the States are Postmates, Seamless, DoorDash. Depending on whatever city you are in, one might be more common than the other. Yelp is a great way to find new restaurants and activities. Good old trusty Instagram, which I gather you have in Australia. Just kidding. You can browse by location and find out what's going on in your neighborhood. And I also recommend downloading transportation-related apps like Lyft, like Uber ahead of time if you don't have it on your phone already, because it'll make your arrival from the airport a lot smoother.
No, that one is, so I had this grand plan. So you got 2 backpacks and another bit of luggage and things. And I had this grand plan. I'd mapped out which train to get to which bus to get to, don't do that for the first time when you arrive. It's not worth it. Yes, it's expensive. It'll cost you, in New York, it'll cost you $50, $60 to go from the airport to wherever you're staying. But just throw your stuff in and make that first arrival a calm one and enjoy it. You don't want to do that right at the beginning. Google Maps. One note also is around apps. You might read about apps. Venmo is a good example. Venmo is really popular for effectively texting money to each other. It's a great app and everyone uses it here, but you possibly won't find it on the Australian App Store. So if you're finding that there are some apps that you can't work out why you can't find them, you can only do that once you get here and you change your app stores. You go into the settings on your phone and you can change which app store you're looking for, because some are marketed towards particular markets. So that's just a tip, because I know that I spent a long time trying to work out why I couldn't find Venmo, and I realized that was why. So Google Maps, City Mapper were 2 of the ones that you mentioned. Any other tips, when you've arrived in this new city, have you got some tips for people that have just arrived, who've just landed?
Yeah, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about transportation, especially because the US is not the most public transportation friendly country. Apps are really important in navigation, but it's also really important to understand how public transportation works and what the availability is in your city. So apps like Transit in New York can help you plan your commute and help guide you towards your destination. But some, like New York, have really great public transit, and you can live without a car. I personally don't have a car in New York. But if you're in a city like Los Angeles, you might find it a lot harder. You might find that you need to secure some form of an alternative form of transportation. And if you're planning to drive in the US, make sure that the state that you're moving to and their Department of Motor Vehicles, make sure to look up what you'll require in order to be able to drive. So in some states, you may be able to use an international driver's permit to rent a car. In others, but most of them will actually let you drive with your Australian driver's license. So that being said, just look it up, to make sure that you follow the rules. If you elect to use your Australian driver's license, just be careful, because you can't do that indefinitely.
No, that one. So for all the Australians joining, we were talking about Facebook groups and things before, which are invaluable. The Australian community in the United States is really, really strong. We've got some really large Facebook groups for all sorts of cities all over the States. Do be careful when you read advice on there, because everyone's sort of learning as they go, and sometimes the advice is not super accurate. One of as Akinyi was just talking about, if you've arrived in most states in the United States, you can drive. This is again a sweeping rule, but check the DMV yourself.
Your best.
Yes, exactly. Because most you can arrive and you can drive on your Australian license. They'll let you do that because you're just like a tourist, which you can go and rent a car. Once you've been in that, and for most states it's between 30 and 90 days. Once you've hit that, you've now become a resident of the state. Residency is a whole confusing mess, but we'll talk about that later. But it means that you can no longer use your Australian license, and you will be driving illegally as if you were driving without a license. So even though it worked for that first time, and in New York, I'm actually I've got my learner's permit here. You have to actually sit the full written test with all the 16-year-olds and their mums and dads. And then you have to do a practical test just like you did when you were 16 and a half, and then you get your full license. So you do have to do the whole thing again. That's not the same with every state, but there's going to be some things that you have to go through, which I'm terrified about doing a reverse parallel on the wrong side of the road. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all. Yeah, so make sure you look it up yourself. That is probably the best bit of advice that we can give you tonight is, read as many of these resources, but then go to the sources and find the information for yourself. Read the official documentation because it will save you from effectively committing a crime when you arrive by accident, and you might have the best intentions. All right, mobile plans. I've given you a lecture about getting a license. We've talked about apps. What do people need to look into next?
The big question that we find comes up, not only, I promise you, because we're a financial technology company, but is related to finances, right? So a lot of newcomers are understandably concerned about moving and being left in the lurch when it comes to their finances. There's a lot of similarities here between Australia and the US, but there are also many really important differences. So you have to create a plan to ensure that you're financially stable and you always have access to funds throughout the course of your move.
Okay, so you did mention that fun word fintech, which I feel like I'd never heard of before, and now it's like part of my everyday vernacular. So Nova Credit is a fintech, and the idea is that you can help effectively foreign credit scores. So even if Australians aren't familiar with the fact that they have a credit score in Australia, which I certainly wasn't, but the banks and the financial service industry keeps sort of a log of how they've interacted with you. As someone familiar with the US financial industry, like where do you recommend people start in getting set up?
Yeah, so I think the first question usually is around bank accounts. So if you're already using a multinational bank in Australia, so if you're using Citibank or HSBC, you may be able to transfer your Australian accounts to the US. Or if you want to plan ahead of time, you can also look into opening an account even before you move from Australia so that you land on the ground and you're all set. So one of the ways to get around this is to ask your bank about changing to a US address and what the process is. It does differ by bank. If you don't have an international bank, you should really start researching your local bank options in the US and even online bank options ahead of time. And the good news is that most banks don't restrict access to only US citizens. They do have different requirements in terms of ID. Some may require a social security number, but there's still a lot of options to choose from. So you want to consider when you're evaluating which bank account do I choose, look at deposit requirements, overdraft fees, intro bonuses, all that kind of stuff.
No, and you actually touched on something that I realize this is a tiny little segue to the side, but looking up locally what's available to you in your state or your city is really important. Moving from Australia, one of the big things that I realized is that in Australia, I feel like you can travel between states, and yes, my accent from Adelaide is different from someone in Queensland, but fundamentally the sort of banks and the systems are all basically the same. Like you kind of can walk into a Commonwealth Bank or something and it feels very familiar. In the United States, states are very different from each other. So what might be the most enormous organization in New York State might not even be a thing in New Jersey, let alone the West Coast, and you're looking at completely different names. So just when you're keeping in mind about where you want to move, have a look at what's local to your state or wherever you're intending to move, because it will help you. Finding out the biggest bank in LA is going to help you sort of get that settled more quickly. And on that, I'm going to harp on the paperwork. When you go to the bank for the first time, it's, have that folder that you walked through the airport with all of those documents and letters and employment status and visas and photocopies of your passport and things. Have all that on you. Take your passport as well. But that will, when you walk in and you've got that and you can just turn to a page and pull out that weird, I-94 document that you've got, that's going to help you because that makes you basically an easier candidate to apply for an account. In many cases, even as a tourist, you can open accounts at banks in the States, but if you're causing, if it's going to be a 2-hour fiasco with the person you've arrived to talk to, they're probably just going to be like, I can't be bothered. So yeah, organize yourself, stack everything up, get ready, and go to the bank. So bank account relates to, now Nova Credit has that fun word in it, credit. It's huge. Credit history is a really important thing, and it's something that I, personally had no idea just how much it involved. Can you give a bit of a snapshot on what is credit?
Yeah, I think that in countries like Australia or even in the UK, where I moved from, credit might not be as important, but credit is really, really important when it comes to accessing finances in the US. Credit is fundamental to applying for even the most basic things like an apartment lease or a mobile phone, a credit card. All of those lenders will check your US credit score to make a decision on whether you can have access to that product. And so when you arrive in the States, newcomers are typically considered what you call credit invisible, which means that the system can't find you. So even if you have great credit history in a foreign country, a lender can't access your credit data. And so most newcomers have to build their credit history again from scratch, and that process can take 3 to 5 years. That means that you might not have the best rates. It means you might not be able to access certain products. It's just really frustrating when you're trying to get your life started on the right foot. And so Nova Credit is trying to help address this gap by making it easy to translate your international credit history into a US equivalent report that is familiar to all those American lenders so that you don't need to start from scratch. So you can use your Australian credit, for example, to access products and services in the US. And we partner with financial service providers like American Express, for example, who can then use that foreign credit history to review your application. And that service is free. So our partners pay us and you get access to services. So as I mentioned, American Express is one of them.
Yeah. The credit invisible is a term like I hadn't heard that before and that is the weird feeling because people from the States have normally had a credit score since they were like 2 because, parents start up accounts and they build up and up and up. So the concept that you're like, I don't have a bad credit, I just don't have credit is a lot of the time it's something that people aren't really familiar with. So it's getting that first card. You can basically safely say that Nova Credit's primary role is getting that first card, getting you off the ground.
Yes, we'll help you get started life in the US.
Awesome. So yeah, credit, not having credit, massive pain in the butt. Like you don't want that, especially you don't want it for a long time if you can avoid it. What's a good score? Like, can you explain sort of what you're aiming for when the score starts? What are you aiming for?
Yes. So a good credit score is actually used for more than just getting a credit card or a loan or an apartment rental. Credit scores in the States range from 300 to 850. There's a whole rubric. That score range is used by lenders to evaluate if you're trustworthy. And businesses may insist upon seeing that you have good credit before they give you access to products and services. So even some employers, in fact, will run credit checks to see if you can be trusted with company finances or assets. So if you have a history of not being financially responsible, you may actually find it harder to work in the US. And there are 3 main bureaus in the US. So you have Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and all 3 of them collect and maintain information about how you've used credit in the past to help lenders report on whether you're paying your bills on time, if you've ever defaulted on a loan, and how much debt you owe.
Okay, yeah. And I know we're obviously this is you work at Nova Credit and we're sort of talking a lot about credit. And I think the point we really need to get across is it's as fundamental as any part. It's sort of the bit that is at the top of the pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid. It's the foundation because you need it to get the nicer apartment that you want to aim for. That sort of relies on having credit and the nice, if you need to rent a car or as you said, to get a job, a new job, that might involve some element of credit checks and things. So it really is just important for everything. So once you're here, do you I know I read a lot of nonsense information about sort of building up that score quickly. Not too much. Yeah, what was it some debt, not too much. Don't be over debt. Pay off cards. Don't pay off cards. Can you just sort of give people a bit of a summary of what the best practices are?
Yeah, so I would say one of the easiest ways, rather, to build up credit quickly in the US is through a credit card. And that might seem a bit strange if you come from a place where you don't really use credit cards, but honestly, in the States, many people have credit cards. It's something that's just really common in the culture. The important thing is to pay it off as soon as you can, keep the ratio low, and that way you won't owe too much interest. But through our partnership with American Express, you can use your Australian credit score to apply for an Amex personal credit card. And so we recommend that you first visit our site and see how your Australian score translates in the US. You'll see kind of what your equivalent score band is, what type of cards you might be eligible for. And then when you're ready to apply, you can actually indicate in the actual application that you identify as a newcomer with Australian credit history. And then eligible applicants are shown the option to use their Australian credit report. That being said, you can also use Nova Credit for other services like apartment lease or student loan. And when you're approved, you can start to build your US credit score and gain access to a wider array of products in the future. You can spend as much or as little as you want. Again, it's your choice, but you'll ultimately still build your credit in the process. The best practices are to pay your bill on time every month, use less than 30% at any given time. So for example, let's say you have a credit limit on your card of 2,000. Try not to let that go above 600 at any time. And if it gets close, you can pay it down again right away, even if it's in the middle of the month, just to keep that ratio lower.
Okay, so can all the people watching, they're all in Australia, or the majority of them are in Australia, can they do anything to start sort of getting this ball rolling?
It's not really, because most lenders will require that you have at least a US address before you apply. But as soon as you are in the States, even if it's a temporary address, you can get started.
Okay, cool. That's a good, again, side segue to the fact that I need everyone to know that it feels like this whole problem of moving, a lot of it's going to be like you've got chickens and eggs stacked on top of each other. And it's basically like you can't get a bank account until you've got Social Security, and you can't have Social Security until you've got an address, and you can't have an address until you've got a bank account. Like you will feel like you're sort of stuck in a little bit of a loop, and that's normal. I think give yourself a break when you've moved, because one of the things that I sort of talk a lot about is that there's a lot of stresses. Like there's all these big things we're talking about, you're thinking about building a credit score, and you're thinking about which like reverse parallel park you have to do tomorrow, and you've got all these different things that even, like I was talking about at the beginning, like buying a sandwich can feel like a completely overwhelming experience. So give yourself a break. It's great that you're here and you're learning a few tips and tricks so that you've got these up your sleeve, but it'll be a slow road at the very beginning, because it will just involve you going through this process, and you will be knocked back for a credit card the first time, or potentially like that's why we've got Nova Credit, because you don't have to go into the bank and be rejected like I was at the first the first time, because Nova Credit wasn't around. But yeah, like I think it's really important to know, because the emotional part, like especially with COVID, we've all been locked in our homes. You've probably had plans, and I know you've had plans to move for 6, 12, 24, your whole life you've planned to move, and that's been delayed. So there's a lot of stresses involved with moving, even in the best of times. So take it slow, make sure you're ready, as we talked about at the start, build that like catalog of information, build the catalog, like savings and things, be ready for a big transition. It all just sort of will make your life a happier time when you've arrived in like a New York winter, or if you've arrived to an LA summer and you're like, I had no idea it got so hot or cold. So credit score, it's like 300 to 850. Did they pick numbers out of a hat? Like, so cool. So what's a good score? Like if I'm wanting, so we're talking about cars, we're talking about houses, we're talking about all this kind of stuff. What's a score that people should be aiming for?
Yeah, so there are a range of things. There's poor, there's fair, there's good, there's excellent. Fair credit is generally a score of 630 to 689, and a good score typically starts at 619. You can tell I'm trying to roll numbers off the top of my head. But generally speaking, though, 720 and above is considered excellent, and you're pretty much going to get access to the best rates in the market at that level. Okay,
cool. So yeah, aiming for that sort of 720. Like I know, yeah, that sort of credit invisible thing at the beginning, you can't even find your credit score, and then one of the credit places will start to show you when you start to build and build and build. Should people be checking their scores once they're over here? Is that something like, is that important, or yeah, how do you do that?
You can check your US credit score for free with most major banks if you have an existing account. You can also use online platforms like Credit Karma, and you can typically check your credit score as often as you want to. One of the most common myths is that checking frequently negatively impacts your score, and that is really just a myth. Just because you can check your credit score whenever you want doesn't mean that you should or that you need to. Deciding when to check your credit score depends really on your personal circumstances. So for many people, checking annually is enough, but some people prefer to check their credit scores monthly or weekly, particularly if they have a big purchase or an event coming up, like say you want to rent an apartment or you want to buy a house, or even if you newly come to the country.
Cool. Yeah, so it's worth sort of checking it, and yeah, that point about that it's okay to check your score with those apps. Like there's no downside. Important, because I know that's a very confusing one. You'll read, if you Google, can I check my credit score? You'll be bombarded with information about like, no. But yeah, you can with those. Credit Karma's a good one. The banks are good ones. So that's credit. What else have you got? What's next?
Yeah. So I think that we talked about all the like the endless checklist of things you need to do, right? But I think one of the most important things to start with life off on the right foot in the US is really prioritize finding community. No matter where you decide to live, there's so many ways that you can meet new people and try and meet as many as you can. And of course, there's communities like America Josh, which you've already found. Josh hosts really great meetups in New York. I've been to a couple of myself.
One day we'll be back to, actually having meetups in person. I can see you again.
Yes, yes. One day we'll be back to meetups in person, but perhaps in the meantime, trivia, etc. You can meet people digitally.
Yep.
But if you're a fan of the outdoors, you can find a hiking group or on Facebook or a meetup. If you're interested in sports, you can check out sports teams through organizations like Zog Sports. If you're into crafts, you could join a sketching class at a local center or volunteer for something that you care about. Obviously, some of these are challenging, as we noted, during a pandemic, but many of those organizations are still creating online versions of their services, so you can do some digging and still connect with new people. And, in my opinion, one of the most exciting things to do is research and plan and kind of imagine your life and what lies ahead, especially in a year that's kind of as uncertain as this. So we hope that 2021 is a lot better. So dive into it. There's tons out there, and I hope the move is exciting.
No, I agree. I mean, I think one of the crazy parts about moving is that you kind of assume that everyone is sort of knows more than you, or that, people aren't interested in meeting a random new friend and like chatting to them. But I can promise you, from running America Josh now for a little over 3 years, the one comment I get told every single time is that I didn't know who to reach out to make a friend, but turns out sitting around a table, I do dinner with new friends. So it's 10 people in New York have dinner together and none of them know each other. The concept that everyone's sitting next to each other and being like, I just wanted to meet someone randomly, and we made some fantastic connections, and we've got new people living together and partnered and all sorts of things. It's that sort of putting yourself out there and saying yes to things, because it's scary for everyone, and connecting with communities, making sure you've reached out, get into a sports team, reach out to me. I'm always happy to meet people and have beers and coffees and things with you if you're a new arrival. So don't be afraid, because everyone's just as afraid as you are, basically, is the big picture. Cool. Okay. If people have questions, what we'll do is we don't want to hold people up. We know that you're in Australia and it's now about 8:30. It's almost 9 o'clock. So depending on where you are in Australia. So how do we get connected? What do we do from here? If we want to connect up with Nova Credit, or what's next?
After this, if you want to ask questions in particular, you can fill out the feedback form and we'll be sure to respond to those. If you want to check out Nova Credit more generally, just Google us, Nova Credit, or go to novacredit.com. On our website, we have tons of guides, tons of helpful resources beyond just the credit stuff. Just, how do you make sense of the move? And of course, obviously, America Josh is always here as well.
Excellent plug. I like this. We will be sending out a feedback form, which just contains hey, did this answer some of your questions? What questions do you still have? I'm sure Akinyi and I we'll be doing a few of these and working out ways that we can help you out with more, because there are plenty more topics. And I know I just saw a comment, health insurance is a big one that deserves, honestly, we just couldn't fit it into one thing, because there is a lot to talk about and we want to make sure we get it right. So you tell us what you thought and connect up, ask your questions, and we can meet back here and do something digital again. But thank you very much for taking your time this afternoon and sharing some tips and tricks.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and I'll see you all next time. I'm America Josh. Fill out your feedback forms, and I'll see you all next time.
Bye.